Hi everyone, my name is Michelle and welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to be talking about my birth story. So if you haven't already seen my labor and delivery vlog, I'll go ahead and just link it right up here and you can check that out real quick. So I didn't film as much as I would have liked to on my labor and delivery vlog, so I'm going to kind of just go through and explain everything that happened. So we had been planning on getting our floors done downstairs, the whole bottom level of our house. We've been planning on getting our floors redone for a while. We finally went ahead and made the purchase, and so we were just waiting on the contractor to let us know when was a good time for him to come and install them. So we were just waiting on that appointment set up. So on Wednesday, June 10th, me and Liam went over with my mom and we had like a little game day. And while I was there, I got a call from Roger and he said, hey, I got a call from the contractor to set up an appointment. And I'm like, oh great, when is it gonna be? He's like, they can actually come tomorrow and do it at 8 a.m. So I was super excited to have that done. We've had really nasty carpets in our house for a long time, and so it was just so exciting. I wanted that done so bad. So like 3 o'clock we went home and we had some lunch. Roger was already home from work, and so we kind of just chilled for a little bit, and then we started to pick everything up because we couldn't have anything on the floors. We had to pick up all of the toys, everything. I had to empty out like our coat closet. We had to move like coffee tables and like little furniture like that. They said they would move like big appliances, but we had to move everything else. Obviously, I didn't do any heavy lifting, but I was bending over a lot because, you know, we have a lot of toys. We have like a lot of little stuff all over the house. And so we spent a couple hours doing that. I was feeling a little bit of cramping when I was doing game day with my mom, but I've been feeling cramping kind of frequently. And so I wasn't really thinking anything of it. You know, it's just, I'm having some contractions, whatever. It's been happening. Just like if you watch my labor and delivery vlog, you'll see at 37 weeks, I thought I was going into labor because of the contractions, but nothing happened. So I figured it was kind of like the same thing. So anyway, we do that. We end up, there's so much stuff. So we end up cleaning until like midnight. And then at midnight, we're like, okay, there's still some left in the closet because that closet was packed full of just junk. It's kind of like where we just throw stuff if we don't know what to do with it. So I'm like, okay, well, I'll have to wake up early and we will finish what's in that closet. So we go to bed. It's like midnight, like 12:30. We finally like get to settle down and fall asleep. Well, at 1:50 in the morning, I wake up. I kind of feel like almost like you started your period, like when it feels like kind of like wet. This is kind of gross, but this is what happened. So I felt like kind of wet, like maybe like a little gush, like maybe I started my period. Obviously I didn't, but like I said in my labor and delivery vlog, at 37 weeks, I felt the same gush, and again, it was nothing. And so I kind of just laid there for a minute. I didn't get up or anything. I kind of just laid there. I'm like, okay, well, it'll probably just go away. It's probably just like one little thing. Okay, so little side note. So my friend coworker is also pregnant with me at the same time, right? So she was 40 weeks on Tuesday. So that Tuesday she was 40 weeks, and that Thursday I would have been 38 weeks. So we were pregnant pretty much the same time. And we've been keeping in touch. We're like, oh, how are you feeling? You know, like let me know if you go to the hospital, like all this stuff, right? So after I felt that gush at like 1:50, I turn over and I look at my phone and I got a text from her that arrived at 1:30, and she says, hey, I'm at the hospital. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so exciting. And so I, you know, now I'm kind of awake. I'm wondering what's happening with her. And so I stand up and I go to the bathroom and I feel another gush, and I go to the bathroom and it just keeps coming out. So it's not like in the movies where it's just like, boom, it's coming out. Like I didn't really know exactly what it was happening. I kind of had a feeling my water was breaking, but at the same time, I was kind of in denial that was happening because I felt the gush last time and it was nothing. And so I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know what's happening. And so I texted her again and I was like, well, I think my water's breaking and I might be at the hospital with you. And so I was texting her pretty much the whole night. It was like 2 o'clock in the morning at this point. Everyone else was asleep. I woke up Roger and I was like, I think my water's breaking. And then he looks at me and he's like, are you serious? Because we had just gone to bed. We were exhausted. He was doing so much of the heavy, like he was doing so much because I was 38 weeks pregnant. Like I couldn't do that much. I couldn't do very much. I could literally just bend over and pick up small things. So he was lifting all of the heavy stuff on his own, and he did so much work. He was so tired. He was so ready for bed. And so he was so upset. And he's like, are you serious? And I'm like, well, I don't know, maybe it's nothing. And so I stayed up a little bit. I let him sleep a little bit longer, and I just kind of like stayed up texting my friend. Had to end up putting on one of those diapers that I got for postpartum care because I was leaking so much fluid, and I'm like, I am pretty sure my water broke. And I was like, well, my doctor's appointment was at 10:30 in the morning that morning. And so I'm like, maybe I can just wait until 10:30 like last time I waited and she told me everything was fine. I'm like, maybe I can just wait. And then I started like, I wasn't having any contractions at this time. So I started to think like, well, if this is my water, is it bad if I wait? So I started Googling stuff, and it says, yeah, you should probably be seen. But then I texted my friend and I was like, well, what do you think I should do? Like, if my water did break, like, should I come in? Like, if this is my water breaking? And she asked one of the nurses, and they're like, yeah, absolutely come in if you think your water broke. I was just so nervous to go to the hospital if it was nothing because of this whole COVID thing. Like, it's just too much of a pain in the butt to deal with if I am going to go there. Them tell me, no, everything's fine, like last time, but I didn't go to the hospital last time, but she said everything was fine, that was normal. But I didn't want to go there, have them say everything was fine, and then send me home. So I wanted to wait until it was like an absolute, I was for sure going into labor kind of thing. So I ended up waking up Roger, I think it was like 2:30 at this point. I haven't rewatched my labor and delivery vlog. I'm much better at the times on that. I'm kind of forgetful now. I'm about 5 weeks postpartum, so I'm trying to remember everything I can. But I think it was about 2:30, and I woke him up and I said, yeah, I think we should just go to the hospital. And so we got up, we got everything ready. Luckily, because of the scare the week before that, I had all the hospital bags packed and in the car already. So I just had to like get dressed, and we had to let my mother-in-law know that we were leaving because my 3-year-old was still sleeping, and we weren't like planning anything yet. And we also had to tell her that the floor people are coming at 8 o'clock in the morning. So if we don't come back, you have to take care of all of that, which was very stressful. But anyway, so we go in the car and we're driving to the hospital. And so when we get there, I was the only one that was allowed in the building at the time. So he wasn't allowed to go until we got admitted into the hospital. So he just waited in the car. And I guess after like 8 o'clock p.m. at my hospital, because of this COVID thing, you have to enter through the emergency room. So I go through the emergency room. It was so empty. There was literally nobody in there. And so I go in, they check me in, and then one of the guys at the front walks me up to labor and delivery. So they asked me all these questions like, oh, why are you here? And I'm like, well, I think my water broke. So they had me change into a gown and then come lay down, and then they hooked me up to a contraction monitor. And she says, yes, your contractions are very regular. And at this point, I didn't feel them at all. I didn't feel them at all. She's like, yeah, they're about 4 minutes apart. And then she's like, I'm gonna go ahead and check you. And she did. And she says I was about like half a centimeter or like nothing dilated at all. But she said, when she checked me, she said, yeah, there's no fluid in there, so your water definitely broke. And so I was admitted, and they wanted me to have the baby right away. So I went ahead and I called my fiance to come up, and so he came up, and they still had me on the contraction monitor, and they told me that if I didn't progress on my own within the next like 2 hours or so, that they would have to induce me with Pitocin. And I really, if you watched any of my pregnancy updates, I really wanted to go into labor naturally. I didn't want to have any kind of like interventions or anything, since I was going for a VBAC. And I know when you have like interventions, sometimes that can lead to things going wrong and you need a repeat C-section, and I was so scared of that happening. So I really tried to go into labor, get the contractions and progressing on my own. And so I was walking the hallway like nonstop, and then so I went to go walk the hallways. They said I could walk as much as I wanted to for that 2 hours. Roger was extremely tired, so I let him go ahead and sleep, and I was walking by myself. And then again, I wasn't feeling any pain. Like, this was a breeze. I was like, if this is what labor is like, this is so easy. And then so I did that for a while, and they had me come back to the room. I believe it was like every 20 minutes, every 30 minutes, to go lay down and monitor the contractions again. And so that happened a couple times, and then I went and I just bounced on the ball for a little bit, because they said that that's really good for opening up your cervix and getting everything progressing. So I did that for a while. And at about 8:30, I want to say, they came in again to check me, and I didn't really progress at all. I think she said I was like a little bit more, but it was still like a 1, if not, it was like a 1. So they did have to go ahead and hook me up to some Pitocin, which started working really fast. Sorry, the little guy wanted to go ahead and make an appearance. Anyways, so at this point I was really tired. I've only had an hour of sleep that night. And so they put me on the Pitocin, and I wasn't allowed to walk around anymore after getting that. So I could only bounce on the ball. So I did that for a while. And the contractions started up, and they started to get pretty painful. And I was trying to deal with them pretty well, but I've never been in labor before, and so I didn't really know what to expect. And everyone always says when you're on Pitocin, the contractions are so much more painful. So I don't have anything to compare that to. I didn't really have any contractions before Pitocin, but it was getting pretty painful. I tried to bounce on the ball a lot, but when they laid me down to monitor the contractions again and to check me, it was actually more comfortable for me to lay down to like push through the contractions. So I ended up just laying down a little bit. I wasn't progressing very much at all. I was like a 2 after a couple hours, and I was just in so much pain. And so at this point I was asking for the IV medication. I think they gave me fentanyl. They said you can only have 3 doses, and it only lasts for about an hour, and every dose like works less and less. So I was so tired. I was like, I think I could probably do this if I got some sleep. Like my body just feels like it's giving out. Like I was just so exhausted. So they went ahead and they gave me the fentanyl through my IV. And then I did feel the pain still, but it was considerably less. It was much more like manageable. And so I was able to rest for about 30 minutes, I think, before I started getting in a lot of pain again. Or maybe it was about an hour. I think it was like right at the hour mark. I started to feel the pain again to where like I couldn't rest anymore. And so I was trying to deal with that, and I think still I was only progressing very, very little. And so like 2 hours later, I was like crying for the epidural. I was like, please, how soon can I get this epidural? I was only like 2 centimeters dilated when I started asking for the epidural. So I asked for that, and they're like, well, there's only one anesthesiologist on staff, and he's in the middle of an emergency surgery, so you're gonna have to wait for him. Also, we have to ask to see if the doctor if it's okay, since I was only 2 centimeters dilated, and I was progressing very, very slowly. So they went and they asked the doctor about that, and by the time they came back and told me that they came back and they checked me again, and I believe at this time I was about a 3, and they said, yeah, the doctor says you can have an epidural, but we're still waiting on the anesthesiologist. So I was like, okay, and I'm like, okay, well, hopefully he hurries up because I'm dying. And then they're like, we can give you another dose of fentanyl if you want, but like we said, it's gonna get less and less each time you have it, and you can only have 3 doses, and I already had 1. So I'm like, yes, please give me the fentanyl. So they gave me that, and I was able to rest a little bit, and by the time that was wearing off was about when the anesthesiologist came in. And he introduced himself, and they checked me, and I was about a 4, I believe. It was a 4 or 5. I think it was a 4. Again, more accurate times and stuff are on my labor and delivery vlog. But yeah, I think it was about a 4, and he came in and they did the epidural. Which, if you're worried about getting an epidural because you think it'll be painful, let me tell you, it is nothing. I don't know if he was just really good, but I felt absolutely no pain from the epidural itself. The hardest part was they want you to like keep your shoulders like rolled really much. Like they want you to keep your shoulders rolled a lot. And so that was the hardest thing because, you have a huge belly. You're hooked up to a monitor and you're having these really painful contractions. So like keeping your body in that position was the hardest part. But the epidural itself was not painful at all. And so I did that, and I was able to get some more rest, which was amazing. I didn't feel any pain with the epidural. It was amazing. It worked really well. I did still feel the contractions, but it was so weird because I just felt it like it was a knot on the top part of my belly. Just felt like it was a knot on the top part of my belly. I didn't feel any kind of pain, just a ton of pressure, which was completely doable. So I was able to get some more rest, and I actually got better rest this time because, you know, with the fentanyl, it didn't take the pain away. It just kind of like made it a little bit more mild, but this actually like took the pain away. And so I was able to rest. The only thing is my left leg, I could not feel at all. Like it went completely numb. I couldn't move it. I needed help anytime they wanted to check me because I couldn't move my left leg. My right leg was very numb, but I could move it if I tried really hard. My left leg, it wasn't going anywhere. So once you get the epidural, you do have to have a catheter, and you can't get out of bed anymore, which I wouldn't have been able to get out of bed anyway, considering my legs were so numb. But yeah, within like an hour, or shoot, I'm really not good at remembering these times right now. I'm so sorry. But once I had that epidural, I progressed so fast. I think within an hour, I went from like a 5 to a 9. And then in another hour or like 30 minutes, I was at a 10. And so that was something I was afraid of because I was already progressing so slowly that I've heard so many stories about women saying that once they got the epidural, it slowed down their labor so much and they had like this really long experience. But in my case, like it was able to let my body relax. It was able to let my body relax, and so it actually progressed my labor really fast. So I guess it just depends. It just depends on the body and the situation, but I think my body was just so tense and I was in so much pain that I wasn't letting my body progress because it was just in so much pain. So once I checked me in, I was about a 10. My nurse wanted to go ahead and do some practice pushing, and so I did that for about 20 minutes, I think. For like 20 minutes, we did the practice pushing. And then she's like, okay, I'm gonna go bring the doctor in. And she brought the doctor in, and like 4 other people came in, maybe more. It didn't seem like there was a lot of people, but there was at the same time a lot of people, if that makes any sense. But so I started doing the pushing. I think I pushed for about 20 minutes with the doctor in there. And they say, push like you have to poop. And so that's what I did. And at 11:18 p.m., my little guy was born. So it's funny because my coworker, she was in the very next room, and she actually had her little guy at 11:30 a.m. So they're almost exactly 12 hours apart, which is pretty awesome. And yeah, she was my neighbor next door, and when I was walking the hallways, they let me go into her room and say hi. She had already gotten the epidural at that time. And then also down in recovery, we were neighbors as well, and she came and visited me right before they left, which with the whole COVID thing, technically we're not supposed to have visitors, but since she was already a patient there, it didn't really matter. And we were both tested for COVID, and we were both negative. So the nurses were really nice and understanding. They didn't care. They knew we were friends. They were like, oh, your friend says hi, or like they were just like checking up and saying stuff. But because we didn't care, we told them like whatever, tell her whatever. But yeah, so at 11:18 he was born. They put him directly onto my chest, and it was so sweet because I didn't feel like I had the same experience with my C-section. So this was just so magical. I did obviously have a successful VBAC. And so they put him on my chest, and he looked at me. Like, he opened his eyes, and he just looked right at me. And it was just so special. You could tell that we instantly had, like, that bond. And obviously it's true because he doesn't want to leave my arms ever. He just wants to be held always, which I love. I do get stressed out, like I mentioned in my 1-month postpartum update, about just, like, the stress of it. But that's just hormones, I think, and lack of sleep. But it's so amazing that he just wants me to be holding him all the time. But yeah, so I had him on my chest for an hour. We nursed right away, and he latched on perfectly right away, which was amazing. With my first son, we had such a hard time with him latching on, and so this was just so incredible that he already knew what he was doing. It was already so like natural for him, especially being that he was 2 weeks early, which, I mean, it's still full term, so it's totally fine, but I figured, you know, he's a little bit early, so it might be a little bit harder for him. So after about an hour, they came in and they weighed him and did all that stuff with him. And then the nurse took me and we went into the restroom. And to be honest, I know a lot of people say like they bundled them up, they were bleeding so much. And I'm gonna be completely honest with you, I don't really remember a whole lot after this. I was so tired. I was like, not drugged up, but you know, I was just, my mind was thinking about the baby. I wasn't really like paying attention to what was happening to me. And so I don't really remember if I was like, if bleeding a ton. Like, I remember she had me go pee. I couldn't go downstairs to recovery until I went pee. And so I did that, and I tried really hard. It hurt to pee. I don't really remember how much blood there was, to be honest, though, or like any of that. I wish I had paid more attention to that, but my mind wasn't thinking about it at all. And so they had like this cool little wheelchair thing that they had me in since I could not walk. And they had to help me into the chair and wheel me to the recovery room. And once I got into recovery, the nurse told me once I go pee, I can get my IV fluid turned off. And so I was like, oh, awesome. So the next morning, it was like 4 o'clock in the morning, I think, at this point. And I was starting to get feeling in my legs again. And so I called her in. And I'm like, okay, I think I'm ready to go pee. And so she helped me up and we walked to the bathroom. I was able to walk a little bit. I was a little bit wobbly because I was still a little bit numb. But not that much. Like, I felt pretty okay. And so I went to the bathroom. And she turned off my IV. It was still in, and I asked her, like, when can we get it taken out? And she said, you can't get it taken out until you leave, which I was really bummed about because the IV is, like, the worst part of being at the hospital. It's so uncomfortable. I hate it so much. But then my morning nurse came in, and she, you know, she's like, oh, I see she turned off your fluid. You went to the bathroom and everything's good. And I'm like, yeah, everything's great. She checked me again, like, everything. And she's like, okay, well, I can go ahead and take your IV out. And I'm like, okay, please do. And so she did that for me, and I was so grateful. And yeah, the recovery process, the nurses were so great. And it was just pretty chill. We literally just laid there. Roger went, we asked the nurses if he could leave and come back, just because the whole COVID thing, I know that's a rule of places. And they said, yeah, that's fine. And so he left. He got me some breakfast. And he went to the house and checked on the process of the floors. And he just went back and forth a whole lot to work on the floors, mainly. But yeah, so we just kind of chilled in there. And my coworker left the next day. And she came into my room, we visited, took some pictures. And we did have to stay an extra day just because he was born 22 hours after my water broke. So if he had been born 18 hours after my water broke, then it would have been fine. But since it was 22 hours, it was considered a prolonged rupture. And they were telling me that if he is at more risk of getting some kind of infection. And if he does have an infection, he won't show any symptoms until after 24 hours of him being born. And so they wanted us to stay longer than 24 hours. And so we just monitored him, and then the next morning we left. And so it wasn't exactly 48 hours because 48 hours would have been that night, but we left that morning. So he was totally fine. He didn't show any signs of infection. He's still perfect. And my recovery process was going very well. So that is my birth story. If you guys have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments down below. I would love to hear from you guys. And thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in my next video. Bye.